Hi, good morning. Welcome to the 2020 RTA Transportation Breakfast. Our event will begin in less than 2 minutes. Please visit letsgetmoving.org/breakfast for companion materials for today's event. Good morning. Welcome to the 2020 RTA Transportation Breakfast. Our event will begin in less than 1 minute. Please visit letsgetmoving.org/breakfast for companion materials for today's event. Good morning. Welcome to the 2020 RTA Transportation Breakfast, presented by the Research Triangle Foundation of North Carolina. We have a great agenda this morning, including 2 brief presentations on 2 RTA-led studies and an executive discussion on making enhanced transit a reality. Please visit letsgetmoving.org/breakfast for companion materials for today's event. If you're calling in, you will be able to download that information at your convenience. To get our event moving, it is my pleasure to introduce the 2020 chair of the Regional Transportation Alliance, Ms. Maeve Gardner with GlaxoSmithKline.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning, everyone. RTA is the voice of the regional business community on transportation. Our mission is to deliver leadership to get our region moving faster. I am confident that we're going to do that today. I want to thank our sponsors this morning. As Joe mentioned, the Research Triangle Foundation is our title sponsor and our first Omnia Gold member. I also want to thank the RTA leadership team. These organizations contribute to the long-term success of the RTA coalition. RTA Gold and sustaining members are Clark Nexon, Duke Energy, the Greater Durham Chamber of Commerce, Wake County Economic Development, HDR, IBM, Kane Realty, Kimberly Horn, MetLife, the Raleigh Chamber, Red Hat, Summit Design and Engineering, VHB, Weatherall Engineering, and WSP. Our RTA Silver members are AECOM, AT&T, Brios Media, the Carolinic Fund, Chatham Park, Preston Development, Citrix, Coastal Federal Credit Union, Credit Suisse, Duke University, Fidelity Investments, First Citizens Bank, First National Bank, Fox Rothschild, GlaxoSmithKline, Go Triangle, Gregory Poole Equipment Company, Lenovo, Martin Marietta, McAdams, the North Carolina Railroad Company, North Carolina State University, Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority, Ramey Kemp, Ratio, SAS, Smith Anderson, the Special Event Company, Stewart, STV, the Sunrock Group, Truist, the Umstead Hotel and Spa, UNC Chapel Hill, UNC Healthcare, UNC Rex Healthcare, Wake Technical Community College. Thank you to each of our gold and silver member companies for your leadership. I also want to acknowledge our bronze members. These are great RTA member companies, and our regional partners are indispensable for all of us. Today's event would not happen without our event sponsors. In addition to RTP, let's thank Credit Suisse, Martin Marietta, and Stantec for sponsoring today's event. As Joe mentioned, we have a great agenda this morning. I will ask Joe to introduce the speakers, and then he and I will be back for an executive discussion a little later.
Thank you, Maeve. I also want to thank all of our RTA member chambers, including the chambers for Raleigh, Cary, Durham, and the Greater Chapel Hill Carborough, and more than 25 member chambers across 12 counties in Central and Eastern North Carolina. As I mentioned earlier, RTA is funding 2 ongoing studies with the goal of enhancing transit. The first study, funded by the regional business community in concert with great partners NCDOT and Go Triangle, is to create a freeway and street-based, or FAST, transit network. VHB is the lead consultant for that. Our second study is to advance the next zero-fare pilot for transit in our region. RTA commissioned HDR to perform that study. Let's begin with our friends from VHB, who will introduce their team and their preliminary findings. Taruna Tile and Dawn Bryson will now activate their cameras.
Thanks, Joe. Eric, I need the screen share.
And Taruna, you should be able to use your mouse to control it or the page up and down.
Okay. Thank you, Joe and Maeve, for the introduction. So we'll be talking briefly about the RTA breakfast, the preliminary findings for the FAST study initiated by RTA. Joe, it's not moving.
Hold on just 1 second.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Yep, we're good now.
So the team that's been working on this project is VHB with help from Catalyst Design and Stantec. And the purpose of this study is, so RTA, Go Triangle, and NCDOT took this study, decided to partner on this study and to connect the region, the Triangle region, through regional transit by looking at the various studies that has already been done by different agencies and make a connection between Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill. And the purpose of this study is to accelerate the regional movement and the availability of transit in the region. There is a huge lag, Joe. And one of the main ideas is to advance the ideas for improving and accelerating regional connectivity, as I mentioned earlier, and that
Yeah, and if I could just for 1 second, and everyone, I apologize. The way the screen sharing is working right now, you'll touch page down. It'll take about 1.5 seconds for that to register. So we just gotta just expect that happening.
The approach we took for this FAST study was we looked at the regional and all the freeway and the arterials available in the region and what service or the corridors are being served by the Go Triangle service, and what are the future planned for the BRT corridors from the Wake Transit Plan and also in Chapel Hill, and the plan for regional connectivity using the commuter rail, and then to provide service on areas that do not have transit service. And BRT corridors are high frequency, high quality sub-regional connections, but they don't connect the whole region, but they only connect locally a specific area. Commuter rail is a regional connection, but it is express and low frequency. So the purpose of the FAST network is to accelerate the creation of a true regional transit network with high frequency, high quality regional accessibility. And the mindset with which we took on this project and the goal of this project is to add improvements quickly and then scale them over time. And some of the criteria that were looked for shortlisting the corridors was the mobility criteria and also the accessibility criteria to the transit. And we looked at the travel demand from the regional model to various activity zones within the region, and then the trip origins from each of these activity zones, like Chapel Hill, Durham or Duke area, South Durham, RTP, Airport, North Cary, Blue Ridge area or Crabtree Mall area, downtown Raleigh, WakeMed, and NC State was the previous one. This is downtown Raleigh, WakeMed and St. Albans, or towards on the west side along 64 corridor, the Crossroads and South Cary area, and then looked at the combined demand to each of these activity zones, the origins of demand to each of these corridor zones. So on this map, and identified the corridors that have a potential for regional connection. And on this map, if there are dots with a single color, that means there is a local demand. But if there are multicolored dots along any corridor, that means there is a true regional demand for a transit service or any type of commuter service along that corridor. And we looked at the various corridors that came out are US 15501, along I-40 from Raleigh towards Chapel Hill, following on 54, north side, Six Forks and Capitol Boulevard. Glenwood Avenue was another corridor that had a lot of potential. On the east side, continuing on the New Bern BRT towards Zebulon. On the south, connecting towards Clayton, basically an extension of the Wilmington BRT corridor that's under planning right now. On the west side, along US 1, US 64 corridor towards Holly Springs and Pittsboro area. And then the other interesting corridor was the north-south connection along NC 55, NC 540 from Holly Springs all the way to Durham, that had a lot of potential for travel. Now I'm going to hand it over to Dawn to talk about the advantages of fast corridors and also talk about the detailed corridors that projects shortlisted.
Thanks, Trina. I can have control now. I'll advance. Yeah, before I get into discussing the early recommendations, and we're going to focus on the near term, less than 5 years, and explain a little bit of the types of recommendations we're talking about. The first category are low cost improvements on freeways. This could be bypass ramps or on-ramp signals to get people on and off the freeways more quickly. Bus on shoulder system, you should all be familiar with. It's in place on parts of 40 to allow buses to bypass congestion during peak hours. And another one is just more of a regulatory issue of regulations that would allow buses to have the right of way when they're entering traffic from a stop or an emerge. On the street level, the main tools we have there are traffic signal priority that extends the green time to allow a bus to avoid stopping at a signal. This can be used in conjunction with or separate from queue jump lanes that allow the bus to get around a stack of vehicles waiting for red light. And then you might be familiar with the red lane study that was just done that designates specific lanes on major transit corridors for buses to use as sort of a bus rapid transit guideway light form. The third set of improvements are stop related to make access to transit more comfortable and convenient. That includes level boarding, so there's not stepping up and down, helps both handicapped and able users. enhanced bus stops with more information, comfort, and room. And then another thing is this type of floating bus stop where the bus stop is pulled away from the sidewalk. That very effective when you have heavy bicycle use, a bike lane you can see there, or if the sidewalks are very busy also. So this helps both the buses and the passengers. Going now on what we're proposing as part of this, Tarina showed you the kind of base map we started with, showing all the existing and planned Go Triangle and bus rapid transit. What we came up with, a set of improvements on what we're calling high priority and the 0 to 5 year. The high priorities are the first things we think could be done, and we picked those because they have existing strong transit use. There is congestion, which suggests that we can get some benefits out of allowing the buses to bypass this congestion. And there are areas that look to be continuing to grow significantly, so it's an investment that will pay off over time. The first one is extending the bus on shoulder to the southern part of 40 and looking at the bus on shoulder and other treatments on 147, increase service and frequency throughout the whole area. And we could also be looking at improvements getting on and off the freeway. US 15501, as you'll see, is a small piece of a larger route, but it's the only freeway segment, and that could again be bus on shoulder or improved access. Then we have a series of what we're calling direct access. These can be a variety of things. The South Durham one would be keeping the buses on the freeway, pulling them off to stop, and then there's a pedestrian, for example, the pedestrian bridge there for American Tobacco. People could use that in the nearby parking to come down and get on and off the buses directly, so the buses can get passengers without even getting off the freeway. The other examples at RDU, Wilmington, Davis Drive, would be direct ramps for buses to get on and off without interference from traffic, or other improvements that would make that easier. The next step is looking at what we would do on the streets, and you can see now this makes a little more comprehensive network, and this is our whole 0 to 5 year plan. This includes system-wide increased frequency and off-board fare collection, so you don't have to pay on the bus, you pay at the stop or beforehand. Top priority is NC 54 Raleigh Road, getting off 40 and coming into Chapel Hill and ultimately tying in with the bus rapid transit there. And then for each of these, we've identified the type of improvement. This would be traffic signal priority and queue jumps, improved stops, and there's some potential here for the red bus lanes in areas. Holloway, Main, and Irwin, a very different, more urban setting that ties together a number of routes. Similar traffic signal and queue jumps, but here we might look at the floating bus stops. It's not quite appropriate for red lanes. Pool Road, a similar set of recommendations. Glenwood Avenue East of I-440, this is signal priority, enhanced bus stops and red lanes. That was actually identified in the red lane study. Then the next step would be to extend Glenwood Avenue out from the Beltline to RDU Airport. That's a little different facility, so it would have some different treatments. Everyone's, I think, familiar with the 15501 corridor. This would have another set of treatments, the queue jump, signal priority, and enhanced stops. Next would be Six Forks Road. This is such a unique corridor, a lot going on. It's varied from one end to the other, a lot of mixed use development and a new transit center coming. So it has a little bit of everything at different locations. And it kind of ties in with some of the studies that have been done out there with St. Albans, Midtown, and the Six Forks study. Finally, Capitol Boulevard. This would be in advance of the BRT there and extending it farther north in the first stage. One thing we wanted to point out is that of these 10 corridors we've identified, 7 of them use either start or begin or interface with one of the planned bus rapid transit So this really helps take advantage of that investment and also makes it function at a higher level. It allows this type of interlining where, in addition to the bus rapid transit that's serving that corridor, we're looking at our fast lines that could get on there. They could skip stops like an express route, or they could also serve this line. So really improve service in this corridor and along the BRT, and improves speed and reliability for the other routes, and gives you a wide range of travel options for one investment. Some of the longer range projects we're now building on from this start is on the next 5 to 10 years. We have a lot of extensions farther out from what we've already talked about. These serve the corridors through and identified as having high demand. There's potential for some more direct access points. We would like to extend the Glenwood Avenue US 70 to make a continuous connection between Durham and Raleigh. Seems to be a lot of potential there between travel demand, congestion, and land use. And then ultimately, this long range based much more on growth that incorporates Hillsborough and points west to Mebane. You got Chatham Park as that develops, 2 corridors there. We're taking in pretty much all of 540 and taking advantage of the benefits of the toll road and ability to manage lanes there. Another thing, this is just focusing on the type of direct access. This is one from Minneapolis where there's a station above a road, and it could be a freeway or an arterial, and separates all these movements and allows for easy transfers and doesn't interfere with traffic. Those are the details we have now of the recommendations. Trina's going to talk a little bit about where we are in the process and what comes next.
So to wrap up on this study, we can go to right now we are in the public commenting period, which started on July 16th after the RTA webinar, and it will be on, public commenting will be on till the end of August. So if you have any comments, you can send an email to fast@letsgetmoving.org, and you can download this version of the presentation and FAQs and other information at letsgetmoving.org/fast. And once we get the comments, we'll take those into considerations and also look at the ongoing or upcoming highway projects to see where there is a potential for taking a transit advantage, or if there is any opportunity for adding a minor improvement to a highway project which can be recommended to NCDOT to accommodate these transit advantages and improvements. And also we'll be developing an implementation playbook for several of the examples for the high priority projects identified in the 0 to 5 year project timeline. So in a nutshell, what this study will do is capitalize on the great work that has been done by the different agencies in the region, and complement the existing investments that has been made on the transit service or the studies, and also leverage any future opportunities for a transit service, like I mentioned, looking at the highway network opportunities, and to provide improved accessibility and opportunity for a transit service. So the bottom line is the study will be a champion to capitalize on existing and future improvement opportunities to connect the region. I'm now going to hand over to Joe to wrap up the study or for the next step of the presentation.
Sounds great. Well, thank you, Taruna and Dawn and the entire VHB team. I also want to thank Stantec and Catalyst Design. This is really great work on this exciting study that can accelerate a region-wide network for transit while linking to the future BRT lines and connecting to future commuter rail. Natalie wanted me to remind each of our members and partners that our Twitter hashtag for the breakfast is, and you can see it, I think somewhere on one of these slides, is RTA BFAST20. If we go back to the next slide real quick. There we go. It may not be on there, but it's RTA BFAST 20. That's the hashtag for Twitter. So we're excited about that. I also want to personally thank NCDOT and Go Triangle. They have been fantastic to work with throughout the FAST study. They have been great partners. We're certainly helping to fund the study, and it's been a great public-private partnership on that. I will now ask Jorge Luna and his team with HDR to activate his camera. We'll start with Jorge as he provides their initial findings on the second of two studies we're discussing. This is on a zero fare pilot. Jorge?
Thank you, Joe. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Jorge Luna. I serve as a project manager on behalf of the HDR consultant team for the Zero Fare study. Before I get started, I want to say thank you to the RTA, the business community, the study partners, the peer agencies that we interviewed, and the study team for the opportunity to embark and perform this analysis for the region. And let's see, I want to make sure that I have, perfect, control there. And as you can see on the screen, the study team is comprised of three folks, myself, Jorge Luna as a project manager, a local there to the region, which is Patrick McDonough. He's a senior transit planner with HDR. And we also have Dr. Kate Coe, who is a senior economist from the DC area, also that supported us in this effort. Again, just thank you for the opportunity. So let's get started. What is Zero Fare? Zero Fare is a transit agency policy whereby transit agencies or transit patrons are not required to make fare payment or use or display a pass, a ticket, a card, or mobile payment, etc., to ride the system. And again, it's about people, right? Being able to access transit and being able to complete their trips and mobility. So Zero Fare is focused on the individual. And why Zero Fare and not free fare? Because as you can see on the screen, nothing is free. Municipalities, areas, agencies, or regions commit to finding resources and funding those resources in various different ways to be able to provide this public good. So in a way, again, it's not free because we are all investing in our regional transit system. And with that in mind, the business leadership on Zero Fare, the RTA has been supporting the expansion of Zero Fare pilot or Zero Fare efforts since January of 2008. And why is Zero Fare important to the region? A key reason that Zero Fare is important is that it advances equity and opportunity for everyone by removing the physical, financial, and mental barriers to using or considering to use public transit. So in a way, it's helping foster equity, accessibility, mobility, and shared prosperity. So that's one of the key, I think, themes that the RTA and the business community wanted to emphasize in this study and be able to move forward. With that in mind, then the RTA requested HDR to perform the analysis of Zero Fare study in a multi-phase effort. But this phase of the Zero Fare study was commissioned. We were supporting it. And to add some context about this effort, again, it's to identify, it's a pilot study, right? It's to identify pilot opportunities or pilot agencies to be able to implement or perform Zero Fare for a period of time. And to add some context, when we're talking about a pilot is a test or introducing something more widely or before introducing something more widely or permanent. A pilot agency or an entity will monitor, document, evaluate, and reflect on the pluses and minuses of implementing this temporary change in their operating structure before they implement fully or before going into full fare beyond the pilot effort, or also analyze and review the pluses and minuses, particularly the unexpected outcomes of the change in this policy. So again, just why I think it's important to highlight the need for the pilot is not permanent. It's just to be able to analyze, do more research as part of the Zero Fare implementation. For the Zero Fare study itself, the goals were to identify potential candidates in the region, promising service options. What is it that could be feasible to implement, and taking into consideration the concerns of all member agencies, as well as the feedback from peers and literature review. And the intent is also to identify issues to resolve. What happens if this gets implemented in the pilot study on the Zero Fare component? What is that needs to be addressed on the other side of the coin? So again, that's the intent of the study itself, to look at from different angles and propose idea solutions and considerations for moving forward, and then set the stage for next steps. As you'll see in a subsequent slide, it is a multi-path journey, if you will, for this study and this effort for implementing and moving forward zero fare. So with zero fare itself for this effort, I'm trying to get the lag here, make sure that I clicked correctly. Okay, so again, the intent is removing barriers with zero fare. As I noted previously, the zero fare transit removes barriers to using, considering to use transit, and those barriers being financial barriers, that is removing the cost of the hassle of an individual having to purchase a fare, pass, or ticket. The mental barrier, removing the uncertainty of how much to pay, carrying the right change, when you show up to a bus, how to pay for an express or local service. Maybe there's a premium charge, so that's a mental barrier that folks have to deal with. And lastly, it's a physical barrier. It removes the need to travel to key places, maybe to purchase a fare card or a pass or a ticket or a booklet of tickets, or downloading an app if you don't have a phone. So it removes that sort of physical barrier through zero fare, removes that barrier of having to find the right place to purchase your fare. So what are some of the benefits of zero fare? And as you can see it on the screen, there's several benefits. There's reduced travel costs, enhances equity and shared prosperity. There's improved accessibility, economic competitiveness for the region. Imagine a region could say, the entire region is zero fare on all routes, serving the system, serving the user. Faster travel times as individuals, as you remove the need for an individual to look for change, make change, use the fare box, have an interaction, dip the tickets on the dipper, have it be pulled out, or validate the ticket to board. All that takes time, but if you remove that from the equation, it just speeds up the process a little bit more. Improve driver morale and safety. We heard this a lot from the folks that we interviewed, peer agencies, and some of the literature review. They stopped being fare enforcers, and then they create more of a connection with the community because they're not telling folks, enforcing the fare and having to ask people to alight the bus because they don't have the exact fare. And of course, environmental sustainability, as you get more folks to be able to use the service rather than drive their individual cars. These provide some options to use that service. So those are some of the key benefits. But at the same time, any strength also has an opportunity. And with some of the benefits, as you see on the screen, there's some issues or items that need to be addressed, such as the loss of fare revenue. If you're a fare revenue agency right now, you may face the loss of revenue that's coming in. There's maybe some capacity impacts, and rightly so, because we've noted in the research that about 20 to 30% ridership increase happens when a zero fare is implemented. So is the agency prepared to absorb that amount of traffic, if you will, on the bus, and not leave existing patrons behind because of now there's an capacity to over need. Increases paratransit usage at the same time, so that's another consideration. On one side, I said faster travel times. On the other side, maybe slower travel times because it begins to be a 30% ridership increase. The system gets to be more attractive, and more people using the system, just plain and simply boarding, may bog down travel time. So that's a balance that needs to be kept in mind. And also can induce non-travel use of transit vehicles. So keep in mind, right policies to allow the individual to take one single trip and not ride the entire day, the system for the entire day. But yeah, so those are some of the benefits there. And I just wanted to highlight also that zero fare is not new to the region. Zero fare and the concept of zero fare itself in the Triangle area, there's been since 1981 in one shape or form. You'll see on the graphic here that there's several phases and implementation strategies for different agencies and different groups that have been getting zero fare for the region. With, for example, youth 18 and under, zero fare region-wide went into effect in 2018. Senior 65 and older back in 2019. And this is where we are right now in 2020, analyzing phase 7A, if you will, for the current RTA study. And at the same time, maybe there's also the Durham County transit plan, and eventually maybe phase 8, the next pilot study overall for this effort. But we also wanted to be cognizant that in this time we're analyzing zero fare, but at the same time we're also keeping in mind COVID-19 and everything else that's happening. So we don't want to be tone deaf. Yes, zero fare is a good recommendation, but we also have to be living within the confines of what's happening within the region, within the nation as well. So with that, a little bit of a lag there. I'm going to hand it over. I don't know if I'm trying to click.
Patrick, you should be able to advance them now. Yep.
Okay, I think I just did. I did one click and we went forward. Okay, so thank you, Jorge, and thank you, Joe, and everyone being here today to join us. So I'm going to talk a little about how we did the study, and first about our methodology. We started off by talking to our local transit agencies here. Before we talked to peers around the country, we wanted to know what would be of interest to the agencies here to learn about zero fare elsewhere. We did a literature review. We looked at transit cooperative research program reports and documents over many years. We got some from Chapel Hill Transit that they had looked at when they had looked at going zero fare previously. Finally, we looked at ridership data and any economic analysis data we could put our hands on. It's important to note that all this data is pre-COVID and generally pre-2020. So one of the things we did, we started off by reaching out to our local transit agencies to talk to them and to hear what their interests were. So some of the key things that we were hoping for were getting some local data from them, understanding what they are interested in, and hearing concerns that they may have. And so some of those concerns might be, how would going to zero fare impact riders? How would they impact customers? How does it impact the financial situation? How does it impact maintenance if more people are coming onto the vehicles and using them? Okay, let's see. Sorry, a bit of a lag there. I think I hit it twice. Here we go. All right. So after talking with our local transit agencies, we moved on to a couple of peers. And we took some of the suggestions. Some of these peers were suggested by the transit agencies here in the Triangle. There was definite interest in Kansas City, which has been in the news a lot lately. We also heard interest in inner city transit in Olympia, Washington. And one of the things that is interesting about this group of peers to me is that the types of zero fare journeys they have been on they vary themselves. So Summit Stage in Colorado, which is near the ski resorts, has been zero fare for over 40 years. And zero fare basically since its inception, which was originally by the ski resorts. Secondly, Rock Hill, South Carolina, also zero fare from the beginning, but barely 1 year old. They just got started. Then we look at inner city transit and Kansas City, places that have had fares and transit for a long time, but are currently in the process of switching to being zero fare right here in 2020. Finally, a slightly different approach in Lawrence, Massachusetts. This is where an individual city is paying for 3 routes in their city to be fare-free, zero fare for a 2-year pilot program in Massachusetts. So in talking with these peer agencies, we wanted to do some benchmark analysis. The most recent national data for all transit agencies nationwide is what's known as the National Transit Database from 2018. So we took a look at that so we could do our best apples to apples comparisons of our local providers here and providers nationally. One of the things that we did to try to make that comparison is we took the characteristics of those national peers I just mentioned and averaged them to make a sort of synthetic transit agency to see what does an agency that seems capable of going zero fare look like. And just a few items, the most important are they tend to be smaller to medium-sized transit agencies, which maybe have an easier time making a pivot than a larger agency like a New York City or San Francisco. And then second, that they have the capacity to absorb up to a 30% increase in ridership, because zero fare makes the service more attractive and brings more people out. Within our research findings, I think the most important thing is that when you make it zero fare, you do make it more attractive immediately. All of these agencies are seeing 20 to 30% ridership increases, in some cases up to 35, pushing 40% ridership increases on certain routes when zero fare is implemented. Agencies are reporting higher travel speeds, meaning instead of somebody fumbling with that dollar bill to get by the fare box, they just walk and find their seat, and so the buses are filling more quickly and they get back moving a bit more quickly. Some of the agencies are recognizing fare collection saving costs. Right now, sometimes we have armored cars that come to our transit agency depots, pick up fares that were collected and drive them to a bank. Those costs have gone away at some of these agencies. As Jorge mentioned, operators like driving the bus. They don't like to, settle arguments about how much money you should have paid versus how much money you did pay. And these agencies are happy to report fewer conflicts between operators and customers, which they believe builds customer relationships and positive customer service benefits. Issues that they're addressing: crowding on certain routes. Certainly, we got reports of there are some places where we have people standing in the aisle, or we have concerns and we needed to put a new bus out en route to make sure that we could meet the demand. Paratransit, which is the transportation for individuals with disabilities, the cost of that service increases quickly, and there are strategies that agencies need to do to make sure that they're qualifying people who are eligible for that and not extending it more widely than it needs to be extended. Finally, sort of funding and partnerships. What other community and government institutions have an interest in participating in paying for any fares that were forgone, particularly in the cases of places like Kansas City or inner city transit, who had fares and are transitioning to not having fares. Okay, so let's talk about money. How are those agencies that have gone zero fare replacing fare revenue that they had? Well, as you can see here on the chart, a common one is sales tax. So Olympia, Washington, Summit Stage, and Kansas City are all using some portion of sales tax revenues that are already allocated to transit authorities to cover revenue that was lost by fares, or when fare revenue went away, they're backfilling with sales tax revenue. Olympia, Washington commissioned a study and figured out that they were also saving $550,000 a year in collection costs. So by not having to collect the fare, there were a whole bunch of money management and fiscal transactions that they didn't have to pay for anymore. They had also been close to making a purchase of a new set of fare boxes for their entire fleet, and so there was some capital cost savings that came there as well. In Kansas City, in addition to the sales tax, they are still under discussion about whether or not to levy a $1.50 parking surcharge on every parking space in the city for a year. So if you have 10 parking spaces and you're a business, you might pay $15 a year that would support zero fare in Kansas City. In Lawrence, Massachusetts, the city has allocated the funding for 2 years to the Regional Transit Authority to operate 3 particular routes in their system as zero fare. And then Rock Hill is a combination of money from the city general fund, but then also institutional contributions. There's Winthrop University is involved, also the health system there, and one of the major credit unions in the community as well. So let's talk a bit about COVID. We knew as we got a couple weeks into the study that whatever we thought we were going to start with, it was going to be different because the world was changing as the pandemic unfolded. And I would say the most important thing to think about is the challenge that the transit agencies nationally and here in the Triangle are facing with COVID-19, meeting social distancing requirements and crowding. So a typical transit bus has about 30 to 37 seats, depending upon what size of bus you are sitting in. But right now, in order to keep social distancing protocols to help suppress the spread of the coronavirus, these buses are generally being operated at a maximum capacity of 16 passengers, or on smaller 25-foot vehicles, maybe 10 passengers. And you can take a look at the picture here and see those seats with the yellow placards on them. These are seats that people are discouraged and prohibited from sitting in so that we can help flatten the curve. So when you think about zero fare being capable of increasing ridership by 30% over a short period of time with lower capacity buses because of COVID, it becomes easier to sort of overfill the bus, and then the bus operator has to say, I'm sorry, I can't take you. And then people either get left by the side of the road, or the transit agencies have to operate more buses to keep up with the demand, which of course has operating costs. So when we were talking to the transit agencies, being aware of this dynamic was very important to them. And we agree that it's a key consideration before we think about how to pursue zero fare in the Triangle. So with that in mind, we have been asked by Joe's team to think about how we could look at a pilot program. And going back to what I said about the peers earlier, being able to absorb that increase in demand and having capacity to do it, and also having a relatively smaller size system, the agency in our region that looks most like the sort of synthetic peer is Go Carry. And we believe that if they're going to consider a zero fare pilot at Go Carry, they should be thinking about a potential 7-day zero fare pilot for 6 months, or zero fare on the weekends for 6 months. When we look at some of our other agencies, Go Raleigh, Go Durham, and Go Triangle, all of them have routes that even prior to COVID, the ridership was strong enough where crowding would have been a concern. But with COVID in the reduced capacity of the buses, crowding is an increased concern. And so therefore, all three fleets of Go Durham, Go Triangle, and Go Raleigh operate more buses during the week than they do on the weekend. So if you tried a zero fare pilot on the weekend and there was a surge of ridership, the possibility of having buses that are idle on Saturdays and Sunday to respond to additional demand might be able to help with crowding. Chapel Hill Transit, of course, they're zero fare today and continuing with their program. In terms of the finances, Joe asked us to take a look at if we were trying to figure out how much it would cost to implement a zero fare weekend pilot, to take a look at transit agencies in the region and try to put that in perspective. This is sort of a representative agency budget from the Triangle. If we look at all the operating revenue that comes into one of the transit agencies, a lot of those dollars right now are local funding. So 55%, about 15% federal funding, about 10% state funding. And it's important to acknowledge that this is 2018 data. And one other challenge that the transit agencies are facing is that recent actions in the NC General Assembly have reduced state funding for transit. So that 10% has shrunk a bit since this chart was able to be put together. There are some miscellaneous revenues in 10%, and then fares about 8% of the weekday revenue, or 8% of all revenue, and weekend fares about 2%. And so when you look at that and you think about if we were going to go half of the year on zero fare, you'd be looking at potentially about 1% of the overall revenues, operating revenues for the transit agency to fund that zero fare weekend pilot. Now I've got a lag here and I'm about to pass it back to Jorge. So Jorge, it's all yours.
Perfect. Thanks, Patrick. Thank you very much. And hopefully I have control. Good. Thanks, Patrick. A lot of good information. So at the end, why focus is on zero fare weekends and pilot? As you can see on the screen, it lowers the cost risk due to ridership, paratransit increased costs. It mitigates the crowding risk, easier to fill revenue gap, equity and lower income population, as a benefit to be able to serve from the zero fare effort. And zero fare weekends, it's easy to explain. It's zero fare on the weekends, period. Not only a few hours in the morning, a few hours in the evening on certain days of the week. No, it's just easier to explain. Again, we took into consideration the literature review, the peer information, as well as a conversation with local area transit agencies there in the Triangle region. So thank you again. And that on this side just summarizes our efforts. And I want to say thank you to the RTA and the QR study team. And I send it back over to Joe so he could share some of his perspectives on the zero fare effort.
Well, thank you, Jorge and Patrick, and also Dr. Kate Coe and the entire HDR team for your work on the zero fare pilot study. At this time, we're going to transition the meeting to some brief perspectives and observations from the regional business community. And Eric, you can just go ahead and advance my slides if you would, just as we go. You can go to the next one. So the question is, does RTA believe a zero fare weekends pilot has promise? And the answer is, next slide. Yes, we do. Go ahead. Opportunity for the 30% ridership increase, impact on recovery and equity. Other areas are doing it. And only 1% of agency operating revenue for 6-month pilots. So it can be done on the weekend, essentially de-risks it, which is good. Go to the next page. Are agencies, our transit partners ready to do this? Not yet. Go ahead. They've got a number of very legitimate concerns. One is on state funding. Another one is on capacity constraints, just crowding even prior to coronavirus, and then limitations there. Questions about low ridership during the week, or even all week anyway, due to coronavirus. That would translate into low fare revenue for the rest of the days, and there's additional costs. And final question is, what is the definition of success? Because there are other great innovations that our transit partners are doing, including mobile ticketing and new routes. Go ahead, Eric. So what's going to happen now? So immediately what we're doing is HDR, they're completing the report, that preliminary findings. We've asked our partner agencies to give us some formal comments. They have till late August to do that. We're requesting feedback from our members. You see the email address zerofare@. Let's get moving. Next slide there. Next steps, we will commission a follow-up study in terms of looking at the weekend options in more detail and how to address them. We'll seek a couple agencies willing to consider, one or more at least, to consider the pilot, and we'll work with them, and we'll try to elevate the conversation regionally. And certainly county transit plans are being revised right now. Final thoughts, the opportunity is real. There's legitimate concerns, very legitimate, on funding and capacity. We'll look to commission a scalable pilot. We have passed county transit referenda over 3 different years and prior zero fare for 3 different decades. As Jorge showed, we don't need to do the whole region all at once, just like we don't need to do every day, but we're trying to do something. And in light of conversations now, risk of not doing a zero fare pilot and the reasons you see, reduced accessibility and other things. Eric, go ahead. So don't want to forget about the FAST study there. Opportunity to leverage the freeway and street network. Again, scalable, transit advantages, keeping them moving, connect those bus rapid transit and commuter rail, and to create a true viable regional network in conjunction with the BRT lines opening by 2027. And we'll go from there. Okay, go to the next slide. And so now I'll introduce Jay Irby with RTA Leadership Team Member First Citizens Bank to offer his initial thoughts on the presentations. Jay.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning, everybody. As Joe said, my name is Jay Irby. I'm with First Citizens Bank, and I also served as the RTA Regional Transit Chair. And as you all are aware, the business community has always been a long-time supporter of enhanced transit that has the ability to improve people's lives throughout the entire regional community. We as a group have taken more than 10 different RTA tours to different states since 2003 to be able to view their mobility options, and we've learned a lot from those visits. Over the past decade, we've pushed for the incorporation of bus rapid transit in various county plans. We endorsed all 3 county referenda and ran the marketing for the Wake County plan for 2016. We continue to push for enhanced transit that's more frequent, easy to use, easy to understand, most importantly, ties the entire region together. We believe that the accelerated deployment of the enhanced transit service by using the FAST network, as we outlined today, to connect the region and to incorporate this new zero fare pilot will advance economic opportunity, equitable prosperity, financial responsibility, and environmental sustainability. Given the ongoing need for the economic recovery of a lot of our small businesses, and also to help stretch a few dollars for families during this pandemic, the zero fare weekend pilot could actually be a shot in the arm that our community needs. I'm very excited about the potential transit improvements, and I'm also very pleased and would echo Joe's comments about the cooperation among the local and the regional transit agencies with the regional business community. So at this point, I'll turn it back over to Joe to lead us in a brief discussion.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
You cannot, or you can?
Yes.
You can hear me? Okay, very good. Sorry about that. Well, good morning, everyone. Jay, thank you for your leadership and for your comments on the FAST study. Let's get right into the broader discussion. You can see the names of the speakers on the screen: Maeve, Pete with Smith Anderson, Scott with RTP, Julia with Dominion, and Jay, of course. So I'll just start right here for Pete. Last week, WRAL TechWire had an excellent article showing that the Triangle region had the best commute in the entire country east of the Mississippi. Does that mean this whole transit focus is unneeded? What do you think?
Joe, as RTA Freeways Chair, I'm obviously very pleased to hear that the work of our state DOT continues to pay off in terms of ease of mobility. And with the new I-85 connector coming on and opening next year, things should get even better. Having said that, everyone can and wants, everyone does not want to drive or can drive every trip, and having a robust transit alternative really makes sense. So I'm excited about many of the transit advantages, including direct connection ramps between future bus rapid transit corridors and the freeways.
Pete's
Scott,
right. Yeah, Pete's right. FAST network really leverages an existing investment we have in highways, and it will help us be more competitive.
Okay. And Scott, what do you think? How does the park feel about the FAST network? What do you think about it overall?
Well, we think it's terrific. I mean, having an exit right there on the highway at Davis Drive, where we're investing $1.5 billion in hub, I think is really very synergetic.
Okay. And Maeve, what are your thoughts?
And I second Scott's thoughts on the promise of the FAST network. GSK has a significant presence in RTP, and I have many colleagues from multiple counties throughout the region who are looking for mobility options.
Jay, any thoughts?
Yeah, it's great news. I think one of the reasons traffic is far more manageable here, in addition to the great network of highways, is that we're very spread out. It makes it a challenge, though, to build cost-effective transit, but it highlights the importance of maximizing the highway investments that we already have in place.
That makes sense to me. And Julia, as policy chair, what are your thoughts?
I believe the fast network concept has real potential for improving accessibility and equity across the entire Triangle region. I am very pleased to see the openness and focus of NCDOT to look for those transit advantages to keep transit moving on our roads and streets. Those little things can be the difference between someone getting to work, school, or an appointment on time. Also consider the ability to ferry more workers to job growth areas within the Triangle. It can also help businesses maximize their talent pools for job vacancies.
Okay, Maeve, what do you think?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I want to chime in and agree with Julia. Making transit a priority rather than an afterthought should be the practice in the market. Plus, it makes the market more attractive and the region more attractive as a whole.
It's cool. These are good observations. Just quickly looking to zero fare now. We heard the consultant recommendations. They're focused on weekends. Our partners have very legitimate concerns. They're fair, but we all know there's a good promise. Scott, what's your take on all this?
I think it's terrific. We need to try it. It's a low cost investment. I'll be provocative. Maybe we should pay people to ride the bus if we could afford it in a perfect world.
Like it. Our transit chair, what do you think, Jay?
I think you said it earlier. Zero fare weekends, it's easy to remember. It still allows a majority of our revenue to continue for our transit agencies. Plus, it will really ease the access to local businesses downtown and elsewhere, which is very much needed right now.
Okay. And Julia, your thoughts on starting it on weekends if we were able to do a pilot in one or more locations? What are your thoughts?
From an equity and empowerment standpoint, I'm just pleased they've recommended any expansion of zero fare here. And I think the weekends in particular may help families with lower income. People need transportation to be connected to our communities. That being said, Chapel Hill Transit has been 7 days zero fare for nearly 2 decades. So further expansion could be something our partners strive for. We just have to see how the pilot will go.
Joe, I also like the fact that they're looking at weekends. That seems like a simple way to get things started, and obviously they can always expand over time if it looks like it's working well.
Makes sense. And a quick overall comment from our chair in terms of how you think these two initiatives might impact the broader community.
Well, transportation is typically the second most expensive household item, of course, behind housing. And anything that creates mobility options and more accessibility, I think, will be welcome here on the market. And I like the fact that the freeway and street-based systems will allow the region to be more efficient and make the most of our community investments.
Okay, I like that too. We're getting right at 9 o'clock right now. So just to move us towards the end, I'm going to ask Scott Levitan if he has perhaps a final thought on the FAST network or any other things he might want to offer. So Scott, if you have any final thoughts, yeah. I can't hear you.
The dogs were barking. It's easy to make this a reality quickly. I would just say that we're looking at so many mobility issues in the region, and I'm just so pleased that RTA, Go Triangle, and Department of Transportation have taken a data-based approach to this study. That's really what we have to do to look at all of the options we have for regional mobility.
Okay. And I'm going to thank all of our volunteers for your insights on expanded transit, including the FAST study and the Zero pilot. You guys can go ahead and deactivate your cameras. It's 9:01, and so just to finish this up, I'm going to ask my colleague Natalie to speak on how our members can become engaged on these topics even after the breakfast. So Natalie, if you'll give a couple thoughts on that.
Good morning. Thank you, Joe. Thank you to all of our members. A couple quick notes about how you can continue to engage with us and be a part of the conversation. First of all, you can view all of these presentations now on letsgetmoving.org/breakfast. You can email us your thoughts about the FAST study and Zero Fare studies at the email addresses you see here. The FAST study partners would welcome comments from anyone, in particular our partner transit and transportation organizations and RTA members by our August 31st deadline. In terms of next meetings and events, we have a I-40 Regional Partnership meeting next week. That's the 12th annual meeting that the business community hosts in partnership with NCDOT. And then I also encourage you to mark your calendars for early next year, 2021. The RTA 19th annual meeting is January 22nd. Again, you can find more information on all of these on our website, letsgetmoving.org. And back to you, Joe, to close us out.
That sounds great. Natalie, thank you for summarizing all of that. I want to thank each of our members and partners and friends for your time today. As Maeve said, RTA is committed to delivering business leadership to get our region moving faster. The FAST study and the Zero Fare pilot are just two examples of how we do that. Please engage in the opportunities as Natalie has mentioned. I want to thank again our event sponsors, the Research Triangle Park, Credit Suisse, Martin Marietta, and Stantec, our consultant speakers, and our chairs and lead volunteers for their engaging conversations. I want to thank our leadership team and all of our members for your ongoing support and membership. Thank you for everyone for your time today at our annual breakfast. We are adjourned. Let's get moving.